Welcome back to Blockheads 6. I am Alison Dale, part of the marketing team at Moda Fabrics, and I'm here to talk to you about block 4 called Cat's Cradle by Kiley's Quilt Room. I am combining two different fabric collections. One is Corey Yoder's A Bloom, and then also Heather Briggs' Cottage Charm. So I'm combining the two because I think they blend really well together. Before we get started, make sure you have downloaded and printed the pattern. We are doing block 4 today. Let's get started. We are going to start with step 1, which is going to make the half rectangle triangles, which is probably new to a lot of you. It was new to me. So I'm going to show you how the pattern did it, and then I'm going to show you an alternate method if you're not comfortable with the way the pattern is. So on the pattern, it has you cut 3" by 5" rectangles. You're going to draw a line on one of them. I drew it on the light because it's easier to see. And then you're going to match it on the points where the lines are. So you're going to have all this fabric left over on the sides, and it's supposed to be that way. Once it's pinned, you're going to sew 1/4 inch on both sides of the blue line, and then you're going to actually cut on the blue line. And you're going to have two different angles when you're making this so that you get a right side and a left side, so when you put your peaks together you'll have a point. So this is the two pieces, and then you're going to press them open and then trim them to the correct size, which is 2 by 3.5. The pattern will show you how to trim it so that you don't have a true point at that point, because when you sew it together, because of the angle, you will lose your point. So you want a little bit of that 1/4 inch left over when you trim it. So if this seems a little complicated, I would still try it so you can try a new method, but I also did it another way using the Trirex Ruler. On this point, you're only going to use the one side of the ruler. If you don't have this ruler, don't think, oh, I'm not going to buy this ruler just for one block. You can use this multiple times during this series on some of the blocks still to come. It's a good ruler to have. You'll use it a lot. So what I did when I used this ruler was I cut strips 3.5 inches, and then you would just follow the 3.5 inch mark on the ruler, and you put it on here. I'm a lefty, so if it's going to look weird, you would put it here, and then you would just cut. Another thing is I kept the strip folded in half, so you have a right side up and then a wrong side up, so that way you get both the right and the left part of the block, and you don't have to cut it twice. So if you keep the strip folded, you'll get both pieces in one cut. So when you've cut them, you're going to get two different angles, and that's what you need for all 4 sides. So you're going to need 4 sets of these, and then 4 sets of the same thing, but with your background fabric. One thing I forgot. There's a little notch right there on top of the ruler, and you want to cut that little notch, that little tiny notch, on one of the fabrics. So I did it on my light fabric, so when you line them up, you can see it better. So why that notch is important is you know where to put the fabric when you sew it, because that little notch will line up to the side of the angle, and then this lines up to the whole cut. So that way you're not guessing where to line it up on that angle. You know it's going to fit. And you just line these up. They're both going to be different directions. The angles are going to be different. So 1/4 inch, do that 8 times for all 4 sides. And then you will come up with a block that looks like this. And then you sew them together. And I call them mountain peaks because they look like little mountains to me. So that's the first part of the block. And you will need to make 4 of these to finish the block. One of the reasons I like the Trirex is you don't have to trim the blocks other than maybe some of your little tips at the ends, so you're not wasting any fabric. I find it just easier because you're not guessing where to trim. With that little notch, you lose a little bit, but it's going to get caught in the seam allowance, so you're never going to notice. So don't be bothered that you might have a little notch there. You'll never know it at the end. So I'm going to clear everything off and go to our next unit in the block. Now we're going to do step number 2, which is pretty easy, a lot less work than step number 1. We're basically doing a square and a square, a modified square and a square. So basically you're going to start off with your square, pretend there's another half square triangle already there, and then you're going to do what I call fast 45s, where you put a square on here, sew right on the line, turn it over, so you have a 45-degree angle. So you want to either mark right down the line where you're going to sew, or if you're like me and you get lazy, you just go to the ironing board and press it in half, and you have a little crease, and then you can just sew, and you don't have to mark so much. So once you've marked your square, you're going to just place it and sew directly on the line. I trim the excess once I've sewn them just because I don't want that much bulk. I do 2 angles at the same time, press it just to make sure it's correct before I trim because I don't want to mess up my block and have to start all over. If you've never trimmed a block like this, all you have to do is you can either take scissors and then just give yourself 1/4 of an inch and just trim it, or you can take a ruler and a rotary cutter. This is a little itty bitty rotary cutter. And then just trim it. And since I'm a real scrappy girl, I love little pieces, I keep all these and then I sew it and make another 1/2 square triangle. So who knows, by the end of this project I might have a bag or something with all these different 1/2 square triangle sizes. Once I've trimmed them, so those are the 2 trim ones, then I do the other 2 squares the exact same way and then trim them, and basically that's your center. I'm going to go press this and then we'll talk about the final assembly of the block. So let's talk about the whole block construction and layout. So after you've made all 4 of these, you're going to sew them on all 4 corners of your block. I do top and bottom. You want to do side to side, whatever rocks your boat. So I put one on the top and the bottom and I will sew them together. Then on the other 2, I sew my little squares on each side first, and then we'll sew that row to this completed unit, and then the same on the other side. And then once you sew it all together, the block is complete. If somehow you're working on this and you're watching TV and not paying attention and you happen to sew these the opposite, so the peaks are your background fabric instead of your print, it's not wrong, it's just different. It still works because I did it. This is how I know it works, because this is the first one I made, and I was watching a movie that I hadn't seen and wasn't really paying attention, just grabbed them and sewed them wrong and didn't notice until after I finished the entire block. I'm going to sew all these pieces together and I'll come right back and show you the finished block. So here's my completed block using the Mixed Basics collection, and then I'm also making a second quilt using Corey Yoder and Heather Briggs fabrics. So it's a combination of the 2, and the reason I'm making a second quilt is I'm going to donate one of these quilts to the LA fire victims who lost all their homes. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and we will get back to you, and happy quilting!